Teste som, testando o som. Testando som 2, testando som.
So, welcome again, and please make yourself at home here at Unicinos, okay? I don't know if Khadija or would like to give a word. Okay, thank you again.
And now, it's just for. Okay, okay, but I don't know if there is some sound. Okay, so thank you for the invite. It's a great honor to be the first of a batch, first batch of this session. I am sorry, I'm not able to speak in Portuguese. Desculpo. But I will try to be my best in English. My accent is terrific and terrible. Okay, so it's more close than Japanese accent or something like that. But perhaps it will be easy for you to follow me. So I will present you my thesis work, which was about the territorial public management of foreign direct investment project. And the subtitle of my thesis is Contribution to Territorial Intelligence, which is typically a French concept. It's much closer than competitive intelligence for territories, but in a French perspective, we call it territorial intelligence, in fact. My supervisor was Evelyn Land in France and Alsones Balestrin in Brazil. Perhaps the agenda of this presentation, I translate my slides of my presentation for my thesis in English, and it will be the same, exactly, exactly the same. At the beginning, the context of this research with the origin and the proposal. After that, I will present you shortly the conceptual frame I used for this thesis in terms of research question, originality of a work, and the theoretical and methodological framework I followed during the research. After that, some results from two cases, a Chinese company in France and a South Korean company like a joint venture in Brazil. One is a failure, perhaps, and one is a success, we are sure. And after that, some discussion in terms of theoretical contributions and managerial implication, limits, and perspective. Typically, it's the typical agenda PhD student in France has to follow to present his thesis in front of the jury. And it takes 20 minutes maximum. So I think it will be more longer in English than in French, but that's the rule. Perhaps at the first, which is important, it's you saw that I am now a square doc because my colleagues, my Brazilian colleagues, give me a nickname of square doc because I have a PhD. I have a PhD in mechanics, in mathematics, in 1997. It was my first PhD, and now it's my second PhD, so it's why now my hashtag is hashtag SquareDoc. And the origin of this research is typically after having another life before being a professor in management science at University of Poitiers. First of all, just after my first thesis, I was involving in a company which was dedicating on transfer technology and research valorization. We take skills from the university in order to make some R&D for private company, for contracts, and I make that for 5 years. And the company we created, the company with a friend, and when I leave the company, we were 18 PhD in the company. So it was something interesting. And after that, I leave for another organization, which is Invest in Western France, which is an IPA. An IPA, which is an IPA. An IPA is an investment promotion agency. You have this kind of organization in all over the world, in every country. It's organizations that are in charge of the promotion of investment in the country, not exportation. We are not dedicating on export when we are working in such kind of organization. The goal is to attract localize foreign investment in a country. Okay, and I was director for the Southwest France for this organization, and I'll be there for 11 years. Okay, and what happened? I was fired after 11 years because problem of money, budget, etc., etc. It's a waste time with this kind of organization. But during this period, I'm faced and close to problem and management problem of such kind of object, which is FDI, in fact. And the problem, most of the time, the problem is that it's really difficult to organize a network in order to succeed with collective intelligence, collective project, because the nature of the actors involving in the process of research valorization with university or attracting investment with territory, and we are faced with several types of factors: public actors, private actors, profit actors, non-profit actors, etc., etc. And there is a lot of mistakes. There is a lot of controversies. There is a lot of misfunction and dysfunction. And finally, the problem is that as the people are running all the time to do their best, they never take time to stop the machine and try to learn what they are doing. And the objective of this thesis was to finally be able to see if the management science has developed some theoretical framework in order to understand and to optimize the process of attracting and anchoring on the territory some foreign direct investment. And finally, it corresponds what we call in management science opening the black box of a management process. Okay, so it's typically the origin of this research. And the purpose is that when you are involving in a territory, you have a network of actors, private, public, network of economy. And when you attract an FDI, a foreign direct investment, you disturb the network. And the FDI could be considered as an innovation that is in the path of territorial development. And this innovation is disturbing the network in such a way that we have to rebuild another network, a stabilized network. And finally, when we are able to modelize the process, we usually, practitioners, have decided that there is 4 typical phases. To attract and to anchor an FDI, first of all, the investor made a call for application. After that, he selected a short list of sites who can be visiting, and the visits of the sites are going on. After that, he decided a localization, a particular site, and there is an implementation phase. And after this transitional phase, we have a lock-in of a pass, and we have an anchoring. And we can represent that in such a way. This is the typical path of an anchoring of FDI on the territory. At the beginning, we have a lot of solutions, reducing by the investors for site visits. After that, we choose a final destination. But during the implementation, there is also a vortex process. It is not linear, in fact. And after that, after all process of implementation, of all management, you have a stabilized situation, in fact. And the problem is that the economists explain us what are the criteria factors to locate on the territory. Sometimes people explain how these investments are anchored in the territory, but nobody studies this third phase of implementation. How the public management and the public organization, the public actors are able to speak, to work with the private investor, the investors, in order to succeed with this project. And sometimes it works. Acheter Micron in Sao Leopoldo is the case. And sometimes it didn't work. The investors decide to locate facilities on a territory, and it failed. But why? So it's necessary to open the back blocks of this step and this stage. And it's typically the object, in fact, of my thesis. The issue and the research question of the thesis is very simple. It's to identify what are the characteristics and effects of territorial public management on foreign direct investment projects. And to do that, we have two research questions, because this is the general problematic of the thesis. The research question number one is to explain why does territorial management by the various stakeholders, they could be public or private, of a foreign direct investment project lead to a failure or a success. So explain why is it a success, why is it a failure. And second one, how is an FDI project managed by the various stakeholders with the objective of making it sustainable on the territory and promoting the creation of jobs, creation of investment and innovation. So typically I have two questions to respond: why and how. Why and how. In terms of the conceptual frame, you have to know that it's because of my past in this job, it's typically what we can call reflexive research, and we use the status of reflexive practitioner of Schoen and Argyris, in fact. And the originality of the research is to integrate several management science disciplines into this reflective approach in a public-private context, which is not so easy that we can think, and to study the process being made, so during the time. And the four field and discipline of management science we used for this research is first, public management; second, international management, because FDI is related to international management. Also, it's a problem of strategy of the investors, but also strategy of the public authorities. And perhaps we can define that the attractivity of a territory is the intersection between the strategy of the economy and the strategy of a territory. And after that, also competitive intelligence, because there is competitive intelligence for the investors, but also competitive intelligence for the territory in order to stabilize the process. Because I am a mechanician at the beginning, I use always time the engrenage image to explain what is the theoretical framework. In fact, we have a FDI project as the object of research, and due to the attractiveness of a territory, we can have a movement in a way, and due to the territorial intelligence, we have a movement in another way. And finally, at the interface, we can, the FDI project depends on the internationalization strategy, and here we have two main theories that we can use. First, the eclectic or OLI paradigm from Dunning, which explains us the factors to the internationalization strategy of company, but also the Uppsala model. And the Uppsala model has two times, in fact. At the beginning, first modeling, but the version of 2009 is more effective in this case because it explains us that the internationalization process now is really a problem of building a network. And building an international network in such a way that the company could take a place in a new network for for its internationalization. So we have to consider these two types of things. Secondly, in terms of public management, we have to know things about territorial development, and we use a French author, which is André Thor, which is really interesting because he produced a theory of territorial development, and notably the past dependency of a territorial development. Also territorial management, territorial marketing, because territorial marketing, it's the field that could explain the concept of attractivity, in fact, and attractiveness with a strong author, which is a French, Fabrice Attem, which developed a lot of things. After that, we have problematic about competitive intelligence and territories, and it's a mix between practitioners and researchers, and typically French authors. Potra, which was, how can I say that, a guy from the government who implement competitive intelligence policies in the territories in France. Some experts like Bernard Lawrence, and also Herbeau, which is a theorician, and Pellissier. With Patricia Roy, we directed and coordinate a book on territorial intelligence last year, and it's why now I think we are not so many in France to build this kind of research. And on the interface, to respond to the question of why and how, we use the sociology of translation or actor network theory. I don't know if you are close to this kind of theory of sociology. It's a theory that explains how a network emerged from a field, in fact, and with 4 stages. I will describe more in detail after this theory, the framework, problematization, involvement, enrollment, and mobilization. And with this framework, we can explain why, and also how it's typically the field of strategy as practice determined by Whittington in 1996, and that explains us the difference between praxis, and strategists, in fact, and what people do as a bricolage, improvisation, decision, that for everything was not plain in a strategic process, okay? So here you have the complete framework of our research in terms of theory. So it's a mix of everything. So you can imagine the difficulty at the beginning to be clear on that. It's not in one time, we can, in 1 second, we can build this thing. So we decide to make qualitative research, study case, multiple study case, and with 2 extreme cases, okay? Black swan, really black swan. I will explain you why, because I was very lucky to have this kind of case, because they are totally crazy, in fact. The first is the case of a company ZTE. I don't know if you know this company. It's perhaps the 2nd largest company in China, just after Huawei. Okay, this company is a state company. It's perhaps around more than 200,000 employees. So it's big company. And this company had his headquarters in France for Europe, and decided in 2005 to locate his headquarters for research and development and for the African market close to Poitiers, my city, just on the technological park of a city on the north. And they decide from nowhere. They just decide to put their facilities here in Poitiers. But it's not a small facilities. The first stage of this project was 36 million euros of investment for 10,000 square meters of building. And the total project was 250 million euros of investment for 60,000 square meters of building. So it's a big, big project, okay? So you can imagine when this project arrived in the city, how we can, yes? And Huawei, it's two different companies, but they are involving in the same business. Typically the same business, exactly the same. Okay? ZTE was the first Chinese company who can produce mobile phone with 2 chips inside for the African market, which was really a good idea and a strong innovation for the African market because due to the network and the difficulty to be stabilized on a unique network. So in Africa, most of the time, Cameroon or everything, you have a lot of people who have 2 phones, and they developed the first mobile phone with 2 chips. So the second project, everybody here in Porto Alegre know this project, is the Agate Micron or Agate Micron project in Sao Leopoldo, which is the biggest semiconductor plant in South America, and $200 million of investment for 1,000 the project, 1,000 employees. And so the particularity, the specificity of these 2 projects is that they are involving in high technology. They start from scratch, from the white paper. There is no semiconductors industry in Porto Alegre before. There is no telecom industry in Poitiers before. Okay, and they are concerning South Asian business companies involving in other markets. So it's very interesting. They have similarity and dissimilarity, but they are similar in terms of type of case, and they are extreme because one success fully and one fail very fully also. In terms of methodological network, I hope to be clear because it's when you don't read the thesis, it's difficult to understand. Because I am working as a reflexive practitioner and also for the process doing, I need in fact several things. So I use in the first step secondary data and primary data, semi-structured interview, in order to make a first analysis, which we can call an historical analysis, in order to have the fact and the history of the 2 projects related to time. Okay? For both of projects, it was the first thing. After that, I make what we call the secondary analysis. Secondary analysis, if you want to be more clear about that, you can read the paper from Eaton in 2004, which is a specific way to make some research. You used materials who are not primary materials, and you use analysis made by others, people also, in order to re-understand things or understand things that you are not able to understand in a previous way. But because we must have an historical analysis, it's important to consider that whole analysis after our secondary analysis. And based on the fact and the history in a narrative perspective with Langley methodology, we apply the actor network theory to this historical analysis in order to explain the why. Why is it a success? Why is it a failure? And we call it, in the Eaton perspective, a supra-analysis, which is a first secondary analysis. After that, I made a secondary analysis, which is called an amplified analysis, because I made a comparison between the both projects. And after that, I apply to one project. Also, you reusing primary data, the semi-structured interviews, and with the framework of strategy as practice, the another supra-analysis in order to determine what is, in fact, the results for the territory of the process management for the project. Okay? Is it clear? Because it's sometimes be strange, but I don't use what we can summarize is that I never used the ANT or the SAP directly from the data. It's necessary to start from an historical analysis. It's more clear to understand the different steps, okay? Just to be clear for the actor network theory, it's a theory from Michel Calon, and after he worked with Bruno Latour. And in English, you can read Calon in English, but you have also John Law, who was a big author, theoretical author in ANT, and it's from 1986 for the birth of this theory. And it's sometimes it's explained the emergence of a network and the adoption or rejection of an innovation, in fact, okay? So because we consider the FDI on a territory as innovation, is well adapted to understand the adoption or rejection. And so we start from the identification of a controversy. What is a controversy? A controversy is when actors agree that they disagree. Is it clear? Sometimes it's hard to understand what is controversy, but controversy is really very simple. All actors agree that they disagree, so they can start to speak. Okay? So, and what explained as an actor theory, it explains that we have, at the end of a process, a stabilized network. But this network is really provisory, okay? It's not the final network. All the time, the network could evaluate during the process. And for a complete process management, you could have several loops of translation relating to time, okay? And so how it works, you have a process during the time, and you have four stages. First stage, problematization. The actors are identified, and the actors could be human and non-human. So, for example, in the case of an FDI project, actors could be the CEO of a company, the project manager, but the building also, or the plant. And you have to consider that everybody is able to have this dialogue, in fact, okay? So you identify actors and non-actors. After that, at the end of the stage, and after the discussion, you agree that you disagree, and to solve the problem, you agree that you build an agreement that necessitates what we call a compulsory crossing point. And this compulsory crossing point could be built by an artifact. The use of an artifact is the way to solve the problem, okay? It could be a contract, it could be a building, it could be everything. It depends. Each case is really different, okay? After that, you have a phase of interestment. All people around the table negotiate the role they accept or not to take for the resolution and for the solving of the controversy. And in this stage, everybody is able to escape from the game or stay in the game. But by formalize this step, we are still able to understand who is able to go in the network or not. After that, you have the phase of enrollment. The people accept to be in a network, and they must articulate the roles of everybody. every actors. And perhaps project coordinator is able to do this kind of job. To do that, we can use what we call a boundary object. Okay? It's a tool that permits the mediation between the different actors and that accept to be in front and to participate to dialogue, in fact. And the boundary object, it's different than the compulsory crossing point. Okay? Boundary object, we can read the paper of Starr and Grismeyer. I don't, huh? Grismeyer, I think, no? But Starr and write on the boundary object, okay? And after that, finally, when everybody agree with that, you have a stage of mobilization. And the mobilization, you need the identification of spokesperson in order to enlarge the network, okay? For this stage, we are inside the first circle of actors. From this stage, we can enlarge the network and add a lot of people, okay? After that, you stabilize your network until you have another controversies and you will loop. So the adoption of or rejection of an innovation is in fact a sum of translation loop, like a vortex. It's a vortex process, okay? And non-linear process. And sometimes you failed for a transition loop, so it's necessary to have a new controversy, new crossing, compulsory crossing point, etc. Okay? So this translation process allows the actors to converge and reach a stable and irreversible consensus. And first, the project adoption or rejection, success or failure, would result from a whirlwind movement of adaptation, profit sharing, and successive enlisting of actors and stakeholders during the processes. So it's why it's really important when you have primary and secondary sources to be able to and to be strong in the narrative of the history of a project, because if you don't have a lot of things, you are not able to analyze each stage and each controversies. Okay? So what are the results? I have to be quick. For ZTE, at the beginning, you have a lot of factors. The representative from the region, the state, a political guy, a senator, the university, the states of Poitiers, the local government, and the promotion agency. All actors are present at the beginning of a process. And what the ideal network could be this one. Everybody linked with everybody. What happened, finally, at the end of a process, we have only the company, a political guy, and a local authority, which is not the city. So the network is not complete. So the project failed. Why? First, bad crossing point required. The crossing point was a building. Everybody thought that the building is necessary for the success of a project, but project was successful only for business, and the building didn't make business. A building made only is only an artifact, but it's not finally a way to make business. To make business, you must have contracts with a customer, etc. Secondly, the original translator of a process, which was the university, disappeared during the translation loop. Because these organizations, local authorities, take the leads with the senator. So because the original translator disappears, the company was not able to have a good dialogue with the actors. Second, a lack of international culture. Nobody knows the Ranchi, which is the interpersonal network typically in Chinese culture, and nobody was able to understand the notion of time in a Chinese perspective. So what was signed with the Chinese was considered as definitive for the French people. And when you know the Chinese culture, when you sign a contract, it's the beginning of a negotiation and not the end. And so nobody understands that. Also, excessive communication and public communication with the media, with the TV broadcasts, etc., on the creation of jobs. But it's not the problem. When jobs are not created, you do not have to communicate. And the communication is a big, big problem. Also, it's a problem of economic warfare because ZTE was suspecting to have some espionage problem with states all over the world, and there was a strong attack against this company, Chinese company, from the European communities. Okay. So, and finally, the problem: no neutral project manager from the project. Nobody designed a project manager during, and nobody was neutral. But to succeed with a transition loop in a FDI management project, you must be neutral. No political way of thinking. For HT Micron, it's the opposite. 3 controversies. So 3 loop of translation. And I represent the network at each end of a loop, okay? First, the first controversy is to locate an FDI. Sorry, IDE is in French, sorry. FDI. And so you have Anamicron, which is a South Korean company, a consortium of Brazilian company, created a joint venture, and the states of Rio Grande do Sul, the city of Sao Leopoldo, and Unicinos accept to build an offer, okay? So at the end, they decided to locate on the technopark of Unicinos in Sao Leopoldo. After that, second controversy, reducing the cost. The building is too expensive. And so you have new people, new actors that appears in the network. The new actors is BNEDS, a public bank that accept to finance university in order to invest for the building and the plant, and after that rent to the company. So there is a transformation of a responsibility between the company, private company, at the university. And after that, the second controversy, be able to have skills in the company when she will operate the company. And so train and support R&D. And in that case, new actors. First, FINEP, which finance programs. The Ministry of Research of Brazil, which finance also the university, in order to create ITT chip, which is a center for the research and development, applied research and development for private objective. And so it's the last thing, and also the creation of a master degree dedicated in semiconductors industry. So 3 loop of translation that conducts to a stabilized network and finally a success. After that, we can explain that how they did that, but finally there's a very complex network of complex relationships that emerge, particularly for the problem of HT Micron. And here you have the network, which is very simple because you have inter-organizational relation, you have exchange of things, of contracts. HT Micron gives 1% of turnover for R&D for Unicinos, and Unicinos accept to train, make something for human resources, offer technology services. After that, you have financing from BNEDS to Unicinos, and you have also grant tax exemption for the public authority and other things. And this relationships model typically correspond to the triple X model. How? Because here you have the companies in green, here you have the university in blue, and here you have in red the government, and all actors accept to play the role from the other all around the process. And it's which characterize effectively perfect triple helix. And this triple helix was not an objective. It was not planified. It's the results of some practices, of some strategic decision taken during the process. And so it's why we call it, with Khadija, triple helix as practice, finally, in the paper we had. Okay, and as an amplified analysis, I must be more quick. We have, in one case, because the university and the state and the company was present for the Chinese project, they succeed to deconstruct a triple helix, which is totally crazy, in fact. The training was not a boundary object, but a barrier object, because they are not able to succeed with the university in terms of training, and they have collectively the inability to act as a united front. They are not able to build collective intelligence in France. At the opposite, in Brazil, they build the triple helix being built. The training was really a boundary object, with the creation of a master degree, specific master degree, etc. The fact that the professor of University go to South Korea in order to take advantage for the knowledge of South Korean in semiconductors theory. There's typically a learning effect related to time, because 10 years ago, SAP locate its facilities on the Technopark, and they use the experience taken by this kind of things in order to build to manage the project for HT Micron. And because there is a project manager during all the process, there is a strong ability to control processes and activities during the project. And finally, in one case, we have territorial intelligence, and in one case, we have territorial unintelligence, definitively. And it's why the case HT Micron is really a very good case. In terms of theoretical contribution, in three ways. First, in terms of territorial intelligence, we demonstrate that there's no need of concentration of activities, like Michael Porter said in this cluster theory, to build an ecosystem, because from the white paper and from scratch, they build an ecosystem of semiconductors industry in Brazil. They demonstrate also a capacity for strategic agility is a sine qua non condition to succeed with this attracting FDI, and also building strategic, they are able to build strategic knowledge community during the process. From the beginning, there's no strategic knowledge community, but at the end of the project in Brazil, we succeed, the Brazilians succeed with that. After that, in terms of sociology of translation, we demonstrate that this framework, theoretical framework, is able to produce an ability to solve point of disagreement, and also produce the steps to resolve and debunk controversies around the process. And in terms of strategy as practice, we create the concept of triple helix as practice, and this triple helix as practice is definitely a contract node. All the contracts are locating in this triple helix on the territory, and also that an entrepreneurial university is the heart of the FDI attraction and anchoring system for a territory, which is really important. In terms of managerial implication, we must take into account that for public management, everything starts from a policy. After that, we decide strategy, and after that, we use tools. If we have the three fields, we can call it territorial public management. If we use only strategy and tools, it's project management process. But be careful, if you avoid one of these 3 points, that could be a problem. And it's why we must be consistency and synergy between the two things. First, take into account of human intermediation. Never neglect these kind of things. The trust is really a thing that is very important for this kind of project management process. The notion of time and the longer time is a perspective we must take into account, and notably for the political point of view, and the neutrality. It's really difficult to manage such kind of project if you are too close, particularly in France, for the political guys. Also, in terms of project management process, formalization, contractualization, qualification of the project. What we learned from the Chinese project is that nobody knows at the beginning why the Chinese are going to France and to Poitiers. And because nobody wants to explain why, there is a problem at the end. And also, there's some difficulties when you have several projects, several FDI projects to manage on the territory in the same time. You must manage a portfolio, which is really, really tough. And that implies the mastery of public and political communication all around the time. In terms of limit and perspectives for this kind of work, first, limited public secondary data. The secondary data are extract from the news, the press, and website. Okay, so for the Chinese project, I have 67 secondary data. For the South Korean project, I have 122 secondary data. It's not so bad, but it's not enough. And also some biases introduced by retrospective interviews. And sometimes we have reinterpretation from the actors, and sometimes memories that are not. And I have an example. A political guy explained me that he signed the contract when he was prime minister in Paris, and I put in front of his eyes that it was not him, because at the time of the contract was signed, he was not enough prime minister. So sometimes people rebuild memories, and it's a problem. Second theoretical perspective, perhaps integrating the management of cultural differences in this kind of project, which was not made in this thesis, and perhaps by taking into account an anthropological approach, such kind of Diribarn made it, but some people prefer to use Hofstede framework or something like that, but Diribarn is more constructivist, so it will be better for this kind of things. And also integrate proximity. There's in economics in France, there is a school of proximity, which is really interesting, and we can use to explain the way the translation loop are solved by the actors and the actor relationship. We can explain that by the spatial proximity, the institutional and socio-economic proximity, like resources, coordination, political proximity, which can be very interesting to learn. And in terms of methodology, perhaps closing the reflexivity by using the sociology of translation as a methodology in that case, and perhaps make a action research by helping project manager in FDI, in IPA, in Investment Promotion Agency, for piloting an FDI project by using the sociology translation as a methodology for piloting, because INT is most of time used also as a theory, also as a methodology. In conclusion, I was very lucky because I have two very powerful projects, ZTE and HT Micron, and I have to tell that I was able to do that because of IAE, the School of Management of the University of Poitiers, which has strong relationship with Unicinos, and it's the first thesis we have with Khadija. Both we have strong relationship, and it's and we have to say that. So thank you for your attention, and perhaps you could have some question. I always say I'm too longer, so I was stopped by my jury if I make that in France.
So I have a question. In slide number 4, you mentioned that your assumption is that the FDI is always an innovation.
considered as an innovation.
Okay, in some cases, some localities are not trying to attract innovative firms like a plant for paper and pulp or a contact center or something like that. Would you think that your model applies as well for localities, for territories that are trying to attract FDI that is not innovative the same way that you propose?
Yeah, I understand. Perhaps I am not so clear. In the two study case were in high technology, okay? But they could be in many fields. Services, they could be basic manufacturing is not a problem. The way of thinking is that there is a situation on the territory and the FDI, depending the nature of the FDI, is something new. So because it is new, we can consider this FDI as an innovation, and this innovation is disturbing the local market of employment, local market of landscape, local market of training, etc. And because of this perturbation, sometimes it could be adopted, and sometimes it's rejected. And because we can consider that in that way. Typically, the INT could be used because it's the aim of INT to determine that.
I would make a suggestion. I'm not sure if you mentioned that this is your PhD dissertation, right? It's not. You haven't published the results yet.
I have published, yes.
Okay.
We have some research, not all research, but we have a paper in International Journal of Emerging Market which describe triple as practice.
Oh, I see.
And also I have published the ZT case in a French review, not in English, but in a French review, just to prove that the use of translation theory could be a good way to analyze the adoption or rejection of FDI in our territory.
Thank you.
There is no indication. I didn't mention, but at the present time, I didn't mention, and sorry. At the present time, the building of ZTE is made, okay? They made an investment of 36 million euros, but the building is empty. No jobs since 2012. This company invests 36 million euros on a territory without any public grants, any public subsidies, no public money inside, and the building is empty. So for us, it's a failure. And for the company, it's a failure. It's not totally an entire failure because they use local companies to build the building, so they invest money on the territory, so they invest 36 million euros. But finally, it's a failure in terms of business. I didn't mention, sorry. Sometimes it's so evident that we...
Okay, thank you. I have a very specific question about actor network theory. Why did you use this version of actor network theory from Michael Carlo? Because this version has received a lot of critics. So why did you use this and not the actor network and after, for example?
But the problem is that we have several versions of the steps, different steps. At the end, I think the last version we have from Bernoux, we have 12 steps. But I am not able to identify things for each steps. And it's why I come back at the origin of of a theory because it's more evident and it's sufficient to understand things, in fact. And for me, it's perhaps not the best theory to understand things, but honestly, if you are able to follow a process with these 4 steps, it's sufficient to validate what you're finding, in fact. Perhaps we can add one step could be interesting is the, I think in English is the same word, punctualization step, which you converge with a meta-organization that could be the interlocutor for all actors, in fact. But in the Chinese case, I didn't see this punctualization stage. And for the Brazilian case, this meta-organization changed all around the time, so it was not so easy to identify. So it's why. But for me, actor network theory is so complicated that using the simplest version is perhaps the best way to succeed in research. Because if you use, I don't know if you use this theory, but in 12 stage, wow. And sometimes the discourse are very, very complicated. Noah, what is your opinion on that? Thank you for the invite. Yeah.